Okay, welcome back. Because of the information and telecommunications technology revolution, entire new industries have emerged, with the result that thousands of new jobs have been created and millions of lives enhanced. Okay, so we've got our old friend so it's because of the information and telecommunications revolution. Because of this, entire new industries have emerged. So is this telling us about the noun entire new industries, or is it telling us why entire new industries have emerged? Just write that a little bit straighter. So it's telling us why they have emerged. It's not giving us more information about the noun, it's explaining the verb have emerged. So why have new industries emerged? Because the information and telecommunications technology revolution. So A is fine. B is talking about the gerund here, or at least it's an ing. Okay, so what you should know here is that because of, or any preposition in general, so it's the preposition that's important here. So we've got a preposition, and so because of this thing, so we'll just forget all of this and call it because of X creating. So X is just a replacement for a noun. So because of X creating new industries. Now there's a problem here with when we have preposition plus noun plus ing verbal. Okay, so an ing verbal is a participle or a gerund. In this case, it's kind of hard to tell what it is. We would call it probably a participle, and the reason we call it a participle is because it represents an action, right? There's an action here implied. The action is creating something, and so it's almost like a verb. And actually, according to the GMAT, this is wrong, and the reason it's wrong is because these ing verbals are not allowed act as verbs. It's just not their job. Moreover, prepositions aren't really able to hold things that act like verbs. So prepositions can have ing gerunds as their subject. That's absolutely fine. That can happen without any problems. However, we cannot have an action as the subject of a preposition. It's too much. It's basically too much action for the preposition. As we know, prepositions we've talked about recently, they take nouns. So prepositions must take a noun, and they can take a gerund, but we can't have that gerund. Shouldn't look like an action. And so this is confusing, and it's considered always awkward in the GMAT. So remember this. However, you should know that it's not necessarily the case that this is wrong. It's only if the verbal represents an action. Okay, so B is going to be wrong for that reason. C has because rather than due to or because of, so we'll come back to it. Here in D, due to the information and telecommunications technology revolution, entire new industries have emerged. Here, due to is doing the job of because. It's telling us why industries have emerged. D is going to be wrong. E has due to, but in a slightly different way. Entire new industries have emerged due to the information and telecommunications revolution. That's absolutely fine. That makes sense. It's a good use of due to. So we've got A, C, and E. Now let's look at C since it's the most different. So here what we have is a dependent or subordinate clause. It means the same thing, right? We call them subordinate clauses because they start with a subordinator, such as because. And so they're subordinate clauses, but we call them dependent clauses because they need an independent clause to go with them. And so it's the same thing, whichever you want to call them. what's important is that there has to be an independent clause after the dependent clause. However, here what we get is a participial phrase. Participial phrases cannot stand alone because they don't have verbs or subjects, and so here we cannot put a dependent clause relying on a participial phrase or vice versa. So this is going to be wrong for that reason. So we've established that up until here both of these are okay. They're presented in different ways, but each is equally legitimate. After that, we get a prepositional phrase with the result that thousands of new jobs have been created, and so it's with the result, and then we get a clause, in fact, that thousands, so with the result that thousands of new jobs have been created and millions of lives enhanced. So there's also an and there, but the parallelism is perfectly fine between millions and thousands. So I don't see any problem in A. It looks perfectly good to me. And so with the result is we're allowed to tack that on to an independent clause to say to demonstrate a result of the thing that happened in the independent clause. Here in E we get and so this seems to be a fanboys. That seems absolutely fine because then we've got a noun. So then we say and the result has been the creating. Now there's two ways of looking at this. It's wrong, and you can look at it as being wrong for two reasons. The first is something that we've seen before. So you might remember when we had the question with the legacy, and we said that when we have a noun like this with a linking verb, so this is a linking verb, has been, we would want the creation. So for that reason, this isn't parallel. But there's something else going on here. We want to introduce the result. So we don't want to say and the result has been the creating. It would be much better to introduce it with a that, and the result has been that something has been created. Okay, that's the best way to introduce the result by introducing it with a clause. That way we don't have any confusion by saying the result has been the creating. We have we want to introduce the result with a clause rather than giving has been a direct object, which makes it confusing and doesn't really relate to the rest of this. It just says the result is the creating because we can only take one thing, the direct object here, and so giving it that would make it much clearer, and then we could give the whole thing as being the result. So the result, we could say, and the result has been that thousands of new jobs and have been created and millions of lives have been enhanced. That would be fine, but we don't have that, so E is wrong, A is right. So we went back over because of and due to here, taking the cause. This time I didn't do it as slowly because we've done it before. So if you didn't get it this time, go back to when we did it before, where it's much slower. But what we did was we took the whole cause as we've done in the past. So rather than thinking about this as separate things, I take because of, information and telecommunications technology revolution as one cause. I tack it together, I glue it together, and then I look at what it's modifying. If it's modifying or telling us why something happened, so modifying a verb, then because of is right. So we went through that, and then we saw some things that we haven't seen too often, right? We saw this preposition plus noun plus ing. So if the ing is representing an action, then it's going to be awkward because prepositions aren't made to hold actions; they're made to hold nouns or gerunds. So we concluded this was actually an active participle. And so we don't want to have an active participle, we want to have a gerund, and so it's going to be that B was wrong for that reason. And then we had this issue with and the result has been in E. So that brought us to A as our answer.